Stand with me, not before the Great Sphinx, but beside it. Run your hand along the rough limestone wall of the enclosure from which it was carved. It feels ancient, yes, but more than that. It feels wounded. Deep, vertical gullies run down its surface, like scars left by ancient tears. The stone is soft in some places, harder in others, as if resisting the passage of time while silently recording it. Each groove, each erosion pattern seems to whisper secrets that the winds alone cannot tell. This is not the story of a statue. It is the story of a monument that has witnessed epics, rainstorms, and the relentless passage of millennia. The desert wind is a sculptor of sand, not a carver of stone like this. These vertical scars are not made by centuries of sandstorms. They are the testimony of water. Torrents on it, pouring from the skies, battering the limestone for centuries. Yet the Sahara has been a hyper-arid desert for at least 5,000 years. So the question that hangs in the quiet air is not who carved the Sphinx, but when. What if this monument has been staring into the sunrise long before the first pharaoh was ever born? Imagine the generations that have come and gone, the dynasties that rose and fell, while the Sphinx kept vigil, silent and unmoving. And yet, its face is calm, almost knowing. What is it trying to tell us? To hear a story told by water and stone, we must first silence the noise of our own time. Find the quiet space where you are. Let your breath slow to the rhythm of the shifting dunes. Close your eyes for a moment and feel the heat of the desert sun on your skin, the whisper of sand across ancient limestone. Imagine standing on the Giza plateau 10,000 years ago, the air humid, the Nile swelling, grasses brushing your feet. Let yourself step out of the timeline, you know. Join me now as we walk back, far back, into the mists of the deep past, where the Sphinx has waited for millennia to share its story. Standing beside the Great Sphinx, one feels a presence that is both physical and almost metaphysical. Its massive body stretches across the plateau, carved from living limestone, yet scarred and weathered by the passage of millennia. Every groove, every dent, every shadowed crevice seems to speak, not in words, but in the quiet, unyielding language of stone. And yet, beyond the tangible enormity of the monument, lies another, far more imposing challenge: the fortress of academic consensus. It is a force invisible to the eye, but heavy in its influence, shaping how the Sphinx is interpreted, what questions are considered legitimate, and what theories are dismissed before they are fully explored. For generations, experts have spoken with unwavering certainty. The Sphinx was carved during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, around 2500 BCE. This declaration is more than a historical statement. It is a cornerstone upon which the entire chronology of the Giza plateau rests. The pyramids, the temples, the tombs, and even the smallest stele are all interpreted through this timeline. To challenge it is not merely to question a theory, it is to confront an entire city of knowledge, meticulously built, defended, and preserved over decades of scholarship. To grasp the weight of this challenge, imagine entering a city whose streets are perfectly mapped. Every avenue has a name, every intersection is charted, and every building has been cataloged in exhaustive detail. To navigate this city is to move with confidence along familiar paths, trusting that the world is orderly and complete. But at the city's edge lies a dense, uncharted forest, a wilderness ignored by the mapmakers, unmarked on any map, and full of potential hazards and wonders. This is the forest of the unknown, and it is here, beyond the city walls of conventional history, that the Sphinx beckons us to step. The Sphinx itself is an enigma. Its body bears vertical erosion patterns, inconsistent with centuries of desert winds. Its head is disproportionately small compared to the massive body it surmounts. And perhaps most strikingly, there is a conspicuous absence of contemporary inscriptions claiming its construction. These details, subtle yet persistent, suggest a story that is older, more complex, and far less documented than the established narrative allows. To acknowledge these anomalies is to face the possibility that what we know of ancient Egypt is incomplete, perhaps even misleading in critical ways. The fortress of consensus is not merely intellectual, it is cultural. Scholars operate within systems of authority and tradition. Reputation, institutional affiliation, and the weight of previous research all create a powerful gravitational pull, making it difficult to entertain radical reinterpretations. To question deeply entrenched ideas is to risk skepticism, criticism, and marginalization. And yet, the Sphinx does not negotiate with these human concerns. It simply exists, silent yet insistent, as if daring us to listen, to pay attention, and to read the evidence that lies in its grooves and scars. Consider the Sphinx not as a mere monument, but as a chronicler of forgotten epochs. Each layer of limestone is a chapter. Each fissure is a sentence. Every vertical groove is a word written in the slow, deliberate language of time itself. Academic consensus functions like a translator who refuses to read certain pages, ignoring passages that do not conform to a familiar grammar. But the stone does not lie. It records the actions of climate, the passage of civilizations, and the events that unfolded long before Khafre ever ascended the throne. The Sphinx also reminds us of the incompleteness of history. Written records are fragile, ephemeral, and easily lost. Civilizations rise, flourish, and disappear. In contrast, the Sphinx endures, its testimony carved in stone, offering a silent but powerful witness to events and eras for which we have no other evidence. To dismiss this possibility is to overlook a primary source older and more enduring than papyrus, clay tablets, or monuments of wood. Standing here, one cannot ignore the subtle challenge embedded in the stone itself. Vertical erosion patterns hint at rainfall far more intense than the arid conditions of the post-5000 BCE Sahara. The disproportionate head raises questions about the statue's original form and purpose. The absence of inscriptions from Khafre's reign is perplexing, considering that other monumental projects were meticulously documented. Together, these features demand careful scrutiny, yet the fortress of consensus tends to discourage such inquiries. The monument's whispers risk being drowned out by the authority of tradition, by the weight of textbooks, and by the inertia of academic acceptance. Yet there is an almost poetic beauty in this tension. To question the consensus is to acknowledge that history is not a single, neat narrative. It is a vast and branching landscape, filled with forgotten civilizations, lost knowledge, and mysteries that survive only in the most enduring material, stone, in this case. The Sphinx, in its silent dignity, urges us to move beyond the paved streets of conventional understanding and into the wilderness of possibilities. It invites us to consider that human civilization may be far older, more sophisticated, and more mysterious than we have been taught. The burden of proof is formidable. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence, and challenging consensus requires more than compelling speculation. Each argument must be rigorous, precise, and coherent, capable of withstanding scrutiny from the most skeptical eyes. But the stone itself seems to offer guidance. The vertical grooves are a record, the mismatch in proportions a clue, and the silence of written records a question begging for answers. To ignore them is to turn away from history itself. In contemplating the fortress of consensus, one realizes that challenging it is not rebellion, but reverence. It is a recognition that the universe of human history is vast, layered, and often obscured. The Sphinx has waited in silence through millennia as dynasties rose and fell. Its gaze toward the horizon, unchanging and eternal, reminds us that history is not merely what has been recorded, it is also what has endured, what has survived the erosions of time, and what waits patiently for someone willing to read its story. To stand here is to acknowledge the scale of the challenge, the subtlety of the evidence, and the courage required to venture beyond the limits of accepted knowledge. It is to accept that history is both more complex and more mysterious than textbooks suggest, and that the Sphinx, in its enduring silence, may hold keys to chapters we have yet to fully comprehend. The challenge of interpreting the Sphinx is not merely intellectual. It is a monumental task that demands both courage and rigor. To question the established narrative is to step into a world where the familiar rules no longer apply, where every assumption must be scrutinized, and where the margin for error is extraordinarily small. The fortress of consensus is formidable, built over generations by scholars, archaeologists, and Egyptologists who have devoted their lives to understanding the ancient world. To venture beyond it requires extraordinary care, compelling evidence, and a willingness to confront skepticism at every turn. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. Speculation alone cannot persuade, nor can imaginative storytelling substitute for meticulous observation. Every groove in the Sphinx's limestone, every fissure in its enclosure walls, every disproportion between its head and body must be carefully documented, compared, and interpreted. Each observation must withstand scrutiny, both from peers and from the rigorous standards of scientific inquiry. In this sense, studying the Sphinx is like climbing a mountain. The slopes are steep, the terrain is treacherous, and the air is thin with the weight of established knowledge. Every step must be deliberate, every measurement precise, and every conclusion rigorously tested. Yet, as daunting as the burden of proof is, the rewards of inquiry are profound. The Sphinx, silent and eternal, invites us to look beyond the familiar timeline of Egyptian history. Its vertical erosion patterns, the head's disproportion, and the absence of contemporary inscriptions hint at a story far older and more complex than the conventional chronology allows. Observing these details is not just about challenging consensus. It is about listening to the monument itself. The stone, carved millennia ago, speaks in a language that transcends human records, offering a testimony that predates dynasties, kingdoms, and even the civilization we call Egypt. Imagine for a moment the Sahara not as the desert we know today, but as a verdant landscape teeming with life. Lakes shimmer in the sunlight, rivers wind through savannas dotted with trees, and the air carries the scent of rich, wet earth. This is a world vastly different from the hyper-arid desert that has existed for the last 5,000 years. The evidence of rainfall, encoded in the Sphinx's limestone, suggests that this was the environment in which the monument, or perhaps an earlier version of it, was originally carved. To deny this evidence is to deny the voice of the stone itself. The disproportionate head of the Sphinx presents another challenge to conventional interpretations. Scholars often explain it as the result of stylistic choice or erosion, yet the difference between the body and the head is striking. The head appears smaller, less weathered, and out of proportion with the massive body it surmounts. Some researchers have proposed that this indicates the Sphinx was originally a different form, a full lion, a composite figure, or another symbol altogether, and that the face of Khafor was carved later, restoring the monument after millennia of weathering. Such a theory challenges the timeline of Egyptian art and architecture, yet it aligns with the observable evidence. It is precisely this kind of anomaly that demands both careful attention and extraordinary proof. Furthermore, the absence of inscriptions from Khafor's reign is deeply puzzling. The construction of the pyramids and other monumental projects was meticulously recorded in stone and papyrus. Yet the Sphinx, the largest monolithic statue on Earth, receives no contemporary mention. This silence is deafening. Later texts, such as the controversial inventory stele, suggest that the Sphinx was already ancient and in need of repair during the time of Khafor. If true, this implies a history far deeper than the one typically presented, one that stretches beyond the well-mapped streets of conventional Egyptology. The weight of proof is compounded by the human factors surrounding historical interpretation. Academia is conservative by design. It values evidence, methodology, and continuity. Radical reinterpretations are met with skepticism, and rightly so claims without rigorous support do not advance knowledge. Yet the very same conservatism can blind us to anomalies, discouraging inquiry into possibilities that fall outside accepted timelines. Challenging this requires both courage and humility, a willingness to navigate skepticism while remaining faithful to the evidence itself. And yet, there is beauty in this challenge. To engage with the Sphinx is to engage with history at its deepest level, where the human record is incomplete, fragmented, and often silent. Each groove in the limestone, each scar from ancient rainfall, each silent feature of the statue is a line of testimony waiting to be read. The monument calls on us to expand our vision, to imagine civilizations older than our textbooks allow, to question the neat chronology that so comfortably orders the past. It is a rare invitation to step outside the ordinary, to explore a landscape of possibility where human ingenuity may have flourished long before we believed it could. The pursuit of extraordinary evidence demands patience. Geological analysis must be precise. Historical cross-referencing must be exact. Interpretations of art and symbolism must be carefully considered. Observation alone is insufficient. It must be coupled with critical thinking, rigorous methodology, and an openness to possibilities that challenge our assumptions. In this sense, the Sphinx is both a teacher and a test. It offers clues, but it requires diligence, patience, and a willingness to question everything we think we know. Ultimately, the Sphinx reminds us that history is not linear. It is not a single, unbroken narrative of progress and civilization. It is a layered, complex landscape with peaks of brilliance, valleys of silence, and hidden corridors that may never have been recorded. The Sphinx, in its silent grandeur, points us toward these hidden corridors, encouraging exploration, observation, and reverence for the deep past. It challenges the fortress of consensus, not through noise or argument, but through the quiet insistence of its presence. And so, as we stand beside it, we are reminded that questioning the consensus is not rebellion. It is an act of respect for the stone, for the evidence, and for the vastness of time. It is an acknowledgement that the history we know may be only a fragment of a far grander, older story. It is the first step in a journey that will take us beyond the city walls of conventional knowledge, into the uncharted wilderness of deep history, where the true scale of human achievement may yet be revealed. Standing beside the Sphinx, one cannot escape the sense of scale, not just the physical enormity of the monument, but the immense temporal and intellectual landscape it represents. The fortress of academic consensus is behind us, solid and imposing, a city of knowledge mapped and defended for generations. Beyond that city lies the wilderness of possibility, uncharted and untamed, where the evidence carved in stone invites us to question, to wonder, and to explore. The Sphinx is both gatekeeper and guide, urging those willing to leave the familiar streets of accepted history and venture into the forest beyond. The anomalies of the Sphinx, subtle yet persistent, are our compass in this wilderness. Vertical grooves in the limestone walls of its enclosure hint at rainfall patterns inconsistent with the hyper-arid Sahara of the last 5 millennia. The head, disproportionately small compared to the massive body, hints at the possibility of a restoration, a recarving over a much older original form. And the absence of inscriptions or contemporary records of its construction presents a profound silence, one that speaks louder than any text. Together, these features challenge the neat, orderly timeline of Egyptian history, inviting us to consider that the Sphinx may predate the dynastic era entirely. To ignore these clues is to overlook a primary source older and more enduring than papyrus or clay tablets. The Sphinx is a witness carved in stone, recording climate, erosion, and human ingenuity across tens of thousands of years. Each groove, each fissure, and each weathered surface is a fragment of testimony, waiting for someone patient and attentive enough to read it. In this sense, the Sphinx transcends human history, standing as a silent chronicler of epochs we can barely imagine. Consider the Sahara not as the desert we know today, but as a verdant savanna with lakes glimmering in the sunlight, rivers meandering through grasslands, and abundant wildlife moving freely across the landscape. This is the environment in which the Sphinx, or perhaps an earlier iteration of it, may have been carved. The evidence embedded in its limestone walls suggests thousands of years of intense rainfall, far before the time of Kafur and the Old Kingdom. Such observations demand that we stretch our imagination, that we reconcile empirical evidence with the vast unknown, and that we confront the possibility that human civilization is far older and more sophisticated than we have been taught. The disproportion of the Sphinx's head further emphasizes the monument's mysteries. The massive body, weathered and scarred, suggests millennia of exposure, while the head appears smaller, more refined, and less eroded. Some researchers propose that this indicates the Sphinx was originally an entirely different figure, a lion, a hybrid form, or a monument whose meaning has been lost to time. If true, the face of Kafur may have been a later recarving, a restoration attempting to align the monument with the reigning pharaoh's image. Such a possibility, while radical, fits the physical evidence and challenges our assumptions about the limits of early Egyptian civilization. And then there is the silence of the scribes. Unlike the construction of the pyramids, which was meticulously documented, no contemporary text from Kafur's reign claims the Sphinx. The monument's absence from records that meticulously catalogued monumental works is striking. Later artifacts, such as the inventory stele, suggest the Sphinx was already ancient and in need of repair during the time of the pyramid builders. The text hints at a history older than the dynastic period, a history that conventional Egyptology has yet to fully integrate into its narrative. Venturing beyond the city walls of consensus requires humility and courage. The wilderness of possibility is difficult to navigate. It is fraught with uncertainty, requiring both imagination and rigorous observation. Here, anomalies are not dismissed, but treasured as potential keys to deeper understanding. Each groove in the limestone is read carefully. Each disproportionate feature is analyzed. Each silence in the textual record is pondered. The path is demanding, but it opens up a landscape of discovery that textbooks often overlook, a landscape in which lost civilizations, forgotten knowledge, and deep time reveal themselves through the patient study of enduring stone. The Sphinx also challenges our conception of linear history. Time is often taught as a straight line, with one civilization leading inevitably to another. Yet the Sphinx suggests a far more intricate story. It is a sentinel at the edge of deep time, a monument that has survived cataclysms, environmental changes, and human memory itself. Its silent gaze toward the eastern horizon has witnessed epochs that no text can fully capture. To read its story is to confront the possibility that human civilization has endured far longer and perhaps achieved far more than we currently acknowledge. This wilderness of historical possibility is both humbling and exhilarating. It requires us to suspend preconceptions and to listen, to observe and to wonder. The Sphinx, in its immense silence, does not demand acceptance of any single theory. Instead, it challenges us to read carefully, think critically, and remain open to what the stone may teach. Each vertical groove, each weathered surface, and each disproportionate element is a clue, a whisper from the deep past, urging exploration beyond the boundaries of established knowledge. In stepping beyond the city walls, we are reminded that questioning consensus is not rebellion. It is a recognition of the vastness of history, the fragility of memory, and the endurance of knowledge etched in stone. The Sphinx is both teacher and guide, inviting us into a world where civilizations may have risen and vanished, leaving only their most enduring monuments to testify to their existence. To listen to the Sphinx is to embrace curiosity, courage, and the willingness to explore the deep wilderness of time itself. And so, standing here, one realizes that the journey is just beginning. The fortress of consensus remains behind, but the forest of possibility stretches endlessly ahead. The Sphinx beckons us to move forward, to read its grooves and scars, and to seek evidence in places where textbooks fear to tread. It is a silent, enduring invitation to explore a history far richer, older, and more mysterious than we have ever been taught to imagine. To approach the Great Sphinx with a truly forensic eye, one must learn to read the stone itself. The monument is not merely a figure carved from limestone. It is a chronicle, a record of the forces that have shaped it across millennia. Every surface, every groove, every variation in the rock's texture carries information, a subtle language written by wind, water, and time. To study it properly, one must approach with patience, attention, and an almost meditative focus, observing the minutiae that might escape a casual glance. The first feature that demands notice is the vertical erosion along the enclosure walls. Unlike the horizontal abrasion one expects from the desert wind, these grooves are undulating, deep, and often rounded. Sand-blasted surfaces in other desert monuments often present smooth, parallel striations that follow the prevailing wind. But here, the channels are irregular, meandering, and carved with a rhythm that suggests a slow, persistent force acting vertically. The limestone appears to have been sculpted over centuries, if not millennia, leaving channels that vary in width and depth, some only a few centimeters across, others several meters deep. Examining the Sphinx's body, the patterns continue. The chest, paws, and elongated flanks show a combination of smooth surfaces and uneven depressions. Some areas are deeply hollowed, while others retain sharper edges or raised ridges, forming a complex network of features across the monument's surface. Running your hand along these grooves, one can feel the subtle differences in texture. The smoother, polished ridges contrast with the rounded hollows, revealing a tactile record of time's patient work. This is not random erosion. It is a record of persistent forces acting in patterns dictated by the rock's natural properties. Texture is another critical element. The Sphinx is carved from limestone with varying hardness. Some layers are dense and resilient, retaining sharper angles and edges, while softer layers appear worn and rounded. The contrast is stark on close inspection. One can see how the softer bands have yielded more readily, forming concave surfaces, while harder bands remain protruding, creating ridges. Observing the paws, the flanks, and the chest, one notices the differences. The left paw may show smoother hollows in one layer, while the right paw exhibits deeper pitting in the same stratification. Such differential wear is a subtle but critical clue to the monument's long history of exposure. Even minor features carry meaning. Tiny channels and pitting across the surface of the Sphinx indicate slow, persistent wear over long periods. Micro-erosions form patterns that intersect and overlap with larger grooves, creating a layered texture of scars that records multiple episodes of exposure to natural forces. Some channels are shallow and meandering, almost like the faint traces of water trickling over limestone in modern landscapes, while others are deep and sharply curved, suggesting more concentrated flows. These microfeatures are especially evident along the flanks and near the enclosure walls, where the stone has been more exposed to environmental variations. Comparisons with other sites help to contextualize these features. Monuments carved from limestone in arid regions, such as those in Petra or certain Greek ruins, show wind abrasion as uniform polishing along horizontal planes. They rarely exhibit the vertical undulating grooves or the variable depth depressions seen at Giza. Even natural limestone outcrops nearby show some vertical weathering, but none combine it with the extensive network of channels found on the Sphinx. These comparisons reinforce the uniqueness of the monument's surface, highlighting the need for careful observation. Orientation plays a role in the patterns observed. The Sphinx faces east, and the enclosure channels often follow gravity's pull along the slopes and depressions of the bedrock. Some grooves appear to have formed along natural fault lines or softer limestone seams, creating irregular paths that vary in width, depth, and curvature. In certain areas, the stone exhibits a flowing pattern where the wear is smooth but follows undulating, rolling lines. The interaction of orientation, gravity, and rock composition creates a surface that is complex and multi-layered, a record of forces acting differently across every part of the monument. The head and neck provide further points of observation. While the paws and body show deep grooves and hollows, the head appears smoother, with sharper edges and less extreme depressions. The neck exhibits characteristics of both regions: shallow, rounded grooves and minor pitting that suggest exposure under slightly different conditions. These contrasts reveal that different parts of the monument experienced varying degrees of environmental impact, possibly due to angles of exposure, protective shadows, or the local composition of the limestone itself. Seasonal and climatic cycles add another layer of complexity. Limestone reacts differently to fluctuations in temperature and moisture. Expansion and contraction due to heat, minor frost events, and shifts in humidity can accentuate natural fractures or create tiny fissures. These are visible upon close inspection, particularly along the edges of ridges and in microdepressions, forming subtle textures that only careful observation can detect. The combination of vertical grooves, pitting, and fissures creates a mosaic of erosive activity, each feature recording a different aspect of environmental interaction over centuries. Modern techniques allow even more detailed study. Photogrammetry, 3D scanning, and microscopic analysis reveal textures and patterns invisible to the naked eye. Photogrammetry creates precise digital models, capturing every groove, ridge, and depression in high resolution. 3D scanning allows researchers to measure the depth, curvature, and slope of channels with millimeter precision. Microscopy uncovers micro-pitting and chemical solution patterns within the limestone. These tools enable a detailed multi-scale analysis of the Sphinx's surface, confirming what careful visual inspection suggests. The stone carries a deep, layered record of erosion that cannot be ignored. Finally, shadows and changing light conditions reveal subtleties otherwise invisible. Observing the Sphinx at sunrise or sunset, when shadows elongate, highlights depressions and ridges that flatten under midday sun. Photographs taken at different times of day show how light accentuates vertical channels and microerosion, offering additional evidence of the monument's complex surface. These observations reinforce the necessity of patience, repeated study, and multi-angle observation to fully understand the Sphinx as a record of natural forces. Reading the Sphinx in this way transforms the act of observation into a discipline. Each groove, ridge, and microdepression is a piece of a larger story, a sentence in a language written by time itself. The body, paws, flanks, neck, and head each tell slightly different parts of that story, collectively offering a holistic record of the monument's exposure to natural forces. This is the foundation for any subsequent interpretation, forming a rigorous, detailed understanding before one can even begin to hypothesize about historical or climatic implications. Once we have carefully cataloged the scars and surface features of the Great Sphinx, the next step is to ask the most compelling question: what forces could have produced them? Observing the vertical grooves and rounded depressions, geologists recognized a pattern that does not match typical wind erosion. Instead, these features resemble the signature of water acting over long periods, rainfall cascading down soft limestone, gradually carving channels, smoothing surfaces, and producing the undulating, rolling profiles seen across the monument. The scientist who brought this observation into sharp focus was Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist and professor at Boston University. In the early 1990s, Schoch conducted a detailed survey of the Sphinx, measuring the depth, curvature, and orientation of the enclosure walls and the statue itself. He noted that the vertical erosion patterns could not have formed under the current climatic conditions of the Sahara, which has been hyper-arid for roughly the last 5,000 years. Wind, sand, and daily temperature changes were insufficient to explain the depth and form of the channels. The grooves were vertical, wide, and consistent in a way that suggested the slow but persistent flow of water centuries of rainfall interacting with limestone, exploiting its natural layers and weaknesses. Schoch's analysis included comparisons with modern and ancient examples of erosion caused by water. Across various limestone formations around the world, channels carved by sustained precipitation exhibit the same undulating, rounded characteristics observed in the Sphinx enclosure. Horizontal sand erosion produces linear, scalloped grooves. Chemical weathering from groundwater creates pitting, but rarely forms the deep vertical channels seen here. Only sustained surface water, falling repeatedly over millennia, could account for the combination of features observed on both the Sphinx and its surrounding walls. The broader geological context reinforces this interpretation. The Sphinx sits on the Giza Plateau, a limestone formation composed of multiple layers of variable hardness. Harder layers resist erosion, forming ridges, while softer layers wear away, creating concave depressions. In Schoch's view, the vertical erosion was enhanced by rainfall interacting with this stratification. Water preferentially followed the softer layers, carving deep channels over time, while leaving the harder bands relatively intact. The result is a surface that is not merely weathered, but sculpted a clear record of water's persistent action. Connecting these geological observations with climatology provides an even more compelling picture. Paleoenvironmental research indicates that the Sahara was not always a desert. During the African humid period, which began around 12,000 years ago and lasted until roughly 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, the region received significant rainfall and supported lush savannas, lakes, and rivers. Pollen samples, sediment cores, and fossil evidence confirm the existence of a green Sahara, inhabited by flora and fauna capable of sustaining human populations. This climatic window aligns closely with the kind of conditions necessary to produce the water erosion observed on the Sphinx. If one accepts that the Sphinx's enclosure walls and body were eroded by rainfall rather than wind, it suggests that the monument was carved before the Sahara became hyperarid. In other words, the Sphinx could predate the reign of Khafor by thousands of years. This conclusion is controversial because it directly challenges the orthodox chronology of Egyptian history, but the geological evidence is compelling. The stone itself seems to bear testimony to a time when rainfall was abundant, a time long before the deserts and sandstorms that characterize the modern landscape. Further supporting this view is the disproportion of erosion across the monument. The body of the Sphinx, much larger and more exposed, shows more extreme weathering than the head, which appears relatively smoother. This observation led Schoch and others to hypothesize that the head may have been reworked or partially restored in later periods, while the body retains its original erosive record. The juxtaposition of severe vertical erosion on the enclosure walls and milder effects on the head reinforces the argument that environmental conditions at the time of initial carving were fundamentally different from today's arid climate. Schoch's hypothesis has been subject to extensive debate. Critics argue that other processes, such as wind erosion, salt crystallization, or localized flooding, could account for some of the observed features. However, none of these explanations fully account for the vertical, undulating grooves and the broad pattern of erosion across both the Sphinx and its enclosure. The combination of geological survey, stratigraphic analysis, and environmental reconstruction points most convincingly toward water as the dominant force rainwater falling over centuries, slowly carving the limestone into the complex forms we observe today. The implications of this interpretation are profound. If the Sphinx was carved during a wetter period, it existed long before the conventional dating associated with Khafor's dynasty. The African humid period provides a climatic context for its creation. A green, fertile Sahara with rivers, lakes, and abundant vegetation, a landscape radically different from the desert plateaux seen today. It is within this verdant environment that the Sphinx may have been initially conceived and executed, a monument in a world that no longer exists. Examining the enclosure walls further, one notices additional features that reinforce the water erosion hypothesis. The vertical grooves often intersect, forming overlapping channels, while the broader depressions suggest pooling or slow runoff. Microfeatures such as pitting, minor fractures, and rounded hollows indicate repeated exposure to moisture over long durations. These details are consistent with rainfall and runoff, as opposed to wind, which tends to create sharper, more uniform features, or thermal stress, which produces fracturing rather than channeling. Schoch's methodology also involved surveying the surrounding plateau. Limestone outcrops nearby display some vertical erosion, but none match the Sphinx in scale or pattern, suggesting the monument's unique exposure amplified the effects of rainfall. Its massive scale and flat surfaces provided ideal conditions for water to flow and carve, while the surrounding bedrock offered comparative reference points. The meticulous documentation of these features, through field notes, photographs, and mapping, provides a detailed empirical foundation for interpreting the monument's erosive history. In essence, the Sphinx acts as both a monument and a geological archive. Its body and enclosure walls record not just human craftsmanship, but also environmental history. Observing these features allows scientists to reconstruct aspects of the region's ancient climate, linking geological processes to broader paleo-environmental shifts. The vertical channels and undulating grooves are more than mere marks. They are evidence of rainfall that shaped the limestone long before the Sahara became a desert. The testimony of the rain is therefore not a poetic metaphor, but a scientific observation. By reading the Sphinx's scars, researchers can trace the interaction between natural forces and human construction, revealing a window into a lost environmental epoch. This perspective challenges conventional chronology and invites us to consider a world radically different from the one we know, a world of greenery, rivers, and abundant life, where the first outlines of the Sphinx may have been hewn from limestone, awaiting millennia of erosion before the dynastic period of Egypt. After examining the extensive erosion on the Sphinx and interpreting the vertical grooves as the testimony of ancient rainfall, attention inevitably shifts to one of the most striking features of the monument, the head. Observers have long remarked upon the disproportion between the head and the massive body it surmounts. The body, with its sprawling chest, broad shoulders, and enormous paws, is monumental in scale. The head, by contrast, appears relatively small, almost delicate, an incongruence that raises immediate questions for anyone willing to look beyond traditional assumptions. From a purely visual perspective, the mismatch is difficult to ignore. The body suggests a powerful, massive lion, poised and commanding. The head, however, has a reduced volume, appearing compressed compared to the breadth of the shoulders. Its proportions seem incongruous with the natural scaling principles one would expect from a single, coherent carving. The neck, relatively narrow, transitions awkwardly into the head, emphasizing the sense of disproportion. This visual anomaly becomes even more pronounced when considering the erosion patterns. While the body displays deep, vertical channels and rounded depressions consistent with centuries of exposure to water, the head shows comparatively milder effects, retaining sharper edges and less pronounced grooves. Several scholars and independent researchers have proposed that the current head may not be original to the monument's earliest form. Instead, they suggest that the head was reworked or restored at a later period, possibly during Khafre's reign. If true, this would explain both the disproportion and the differential erosion observed across the Sphinx. The body, exposed to rainfall and environmental forces over thousands of years, retains the full record of its erosive history, while the head, carved or recarved later, presents a surface that appears younger and less affected. This theory is not merely speculative. It arises from careful study of the limestone, the geometry of the sculpture, and the relative weathering patterns. Schock and others have argued that the head's reduced size could be the result of damage to an original, much larger head, possibly part of a fully leonine figure or an even more complex design. Over time, natural erosion perhaps, combined with human interference, may have worn down the original features, leaving behind a weathered nub of stone. Carvers from the dynastic period, seeking to preserve the monument while paying homage to contemporary rulers, might have recarved the remaining stone into a recognizable face, such as that of Pharaoh Khafre. The idea of a reworked head is further supported by architectural and proportional analysis. Measurements of the Sphinx's body suggest that the head should have been considerably larger to maintain proportional harmony with the chest and paws. Art historians familiar with Egyptian monumental sculpture note that pharaonic representations typically maintain a strict proportional relationship between body and head, a principle that appears violated here. The anomaly, therefore, is not consistent with standard Egyptian artistic conventions, lending credence to the hypothesis that the head underwent significant modification after the initial carving. Geologically, the limestone of the head differs subtly from the body in ways that reinforce this interpretation. While both regions are composed of the same general formation, the head exhibits fewer deep vertical channels, less rounding of softer layers, and sharper retention of edges. These characteristics suggest a shorter duration of erosive exposure, consistent with recarving or restoration. Observers can also identify minor tool marks and subtle smoothing patterns that differ from the natural erosive effects dominating the body, hinting at human intervention in shaping the head. The stylistic elements of the head also merit attention. While the facial features are unmistakably pharaonic, the overall form seems constrained by the underlying eroded stone. The proportions appear compressed, and certain anatomical elements, such as the jawline, forehead, and shoulders connecting the neck to the chest, lack the fluid integration observed in other Old Kingdom statues. This incongruity reinforces the notion that the face we see today may have been carved to fit a pre-existing, heavily weathered stone mass rather than conceived as part of a single, unified design. Historical context provides further nuance. Ancient Egyptian records of monumental sculpture rarely, if ever, describe the restoration of pre-existing statues, especially ones as large as the Sphinx. Yet later references, such as the controversial inventory stele, hint that the Sphinx was already considered ancient in the time of Khufu and Khafo, requiring repairs. If the monument predated these pharaohs by millennia, as some researchers suggest, then the recarving of the head could have been part of a broader effort to preserve and honor an existing monument rather than create a new one from scratch. The combination of visual observation, geometric analysis, and geological evidence strengthens this hypothesis. The differential erosion between body and head, the disproportionate size, and subtle signs of human modification point toward a narrative in which the Sphinx's head is not entirely original. Instead, it may represent an adaptation, a dynastic-era restoration of a far older structure whose original design was partially lost to time and the elements. This anomaly also has implications for interpreting the Sphinx's purpose and original design. If the body was initially intended to represent a complete lion or another composite figure, and the head was later recarved to reflect a pharaoh, then the monument may have served multiple symbolic purposes over its lifespan. The later intervention might have been an effort to align the statue with contemporary religious or political paradigms while preserving the underlying monument, a bridge between an ancient, lost world and the dynastic present. Careful observation further supports these ideas. The transition from body to neck and then to head is abrupt and geometrically inconsistent with the fluid proportions found in other monumental sculptures. Minor fractures, subtle surface irregularities, and variations in stone density along the neck suggest long-term stress and weathering that could have necessitated human intervention. Tool marks, while faint, appear in patterns inconsistent with natural erosion, hinting that the current facial features were shaped deliberately atop an already eroded foundation. Even the iconic headdress, often cited as quintessentially pharaonic, might reflect adaptation rather than originality. Its proportions are slightly altered to fit the smaller head and the irregular rock beneath. This subtle adaptation highlights how ancient artisans may have worked with pre-existing forms, transforming and integrating them into the cultural and aesthetic frameworks of their time. In sum, the anomaly of the Sphinx's head provides a second signature of its complex history. The body, with its deep vertical grooves and evidence of ancient rainfall, speaks to a period far older than the dynastic record. The head, smaller, less eroded, and stylistically adjusted, suggests later intervention. Together, these features form a layered story of construction, erosion, and restoration, a narrative that cannot be ignored. By focusing on these physical and stylistic discrepancies, researchers build a compelling case that the Sphinx we see today is not the monument's original visage, but a combination of ancient carving and later modification. Observers are forced to confront the possibility that the monument spans multiple eras, bridging a lost prehistoric world and the well-documented civilization of the Old Kingdom. After analyzing the physical evidence etched into the body and head of the Sphinx, and interpreting the vertical erosion as a signature of ancient rainfall, one is confronted with another compelling anomaly: the profound silence of the historical record. For a monument of such immense scale and symbolic significance, it is remarkable, and to some scholars, deeply puzzling, that no contemporary texts from the Old Kingdom explicitly document its construction. The pyramids of Giza, by contrast, are extensively chronicled. Hieroglyphic inscriptions, reliefs, and administrative records detail the construction of these monumental structures, their workforce, and the logistics involved. Khufu, Khafor, and Menkaure, the pharaohs associated with these pyramids, are immortalized in these texts, their achievements meticulously recorded by scribes and priests. The Great Pyramid, in particular, benefits from rich documentation, including quarry marks, administrative logs, and inscriptions. Yet the Sphinx, arguably the largest monolithic statue on Earth, is conspicuously absent from this meticulous archival record. This silence becomes especially striking when one considers the scale and ambition of the monument. Carved from a single limestone ridge, the Sphinx required extraordinary labor, advanced engineering, and precise planning. Its construction would have demanded the coordination of hundreds, if not thousands, of workers over many years. A project of this magnitude would normally leave abundant textual traces, yet there is none. No hieroglyphs, no administrative logs, and no contemporary celebratory inscriptions exist that tie the monument to Khafor or any other Old Kingdom ruler. Scholars who adhere strictly to conventional Egyptology often point to the so-called inventory stele as evidence linking the Sphinx to Khafor. This artifact, dating from a later period, describes the Sphinx as being associated with Khafor, suggesting that the statue was under his patronage or restoration. Yet even this stele is ambiguous. It was carved centuries after Khafor's reign, and its text implies that the Sphinx was already ancient at the time. It references repairs and modifications, hinting at a monument that predated the Old Kingdom dynasties. The absence of contemporary documentation raises important questions. Why would such a monumental, technically challenging project be ignored by scribes who meticulously recorded pyramid construction? One possibility is that the Sphinx predates the dynastic period entirely, existing long before Khafor and his scribes. If the monument was already ancient by the time it was recorded, the silence of the scribes becomes less an anomaly and more a natural consequence of historical amnesia. The pharaohs may have encountered a pre-existing structure, monumental in its scale and symbolism, which they then adapted, restored, or incorporated into their own religious and political framework. Archaeologists have long debated this silence. Some argue that the Sphinx's location, carved directly into the bedrock, made its construction inherently different from pyramids, and therefore less likely to be recorded. Others suggest that erosion, damage, and later restoration efforts erased earlier inscriptions. Yet no Old Kingdom reliefs, tomb inscriptions, or papyri provide evidence of initial construction, an unusual circumstance, given the Egyptian obsession with recording monumental achievements. Even tombs of officials and workers who oversaw massive construction projects remain silent regarding the Sphinx, despite detailing other projects in vivid detail. This absence is not easily dismissed. Ancient Egypt was a civilization with a profound bureaucratic culture. Scribes meticulously chronicled economic transactions, labor organization, and construction projects. The building of pyramids required enormous resources, yet the Sphinx, a project demanding equal ambition, receives no mention. It is a silence that demands explanation and, for those studying the possibility of pre-dynastic origins, functions as a significant line of evidence. The silence extends to architectural parallels. Other colossal statues, such as the Colossi of Memnon, often come with inscriptions linking them to their patrons and purpose. These inscriptions serve both as records and as tools for legitimizing rulers. The Sphinx, however, lacks such inscriptions from its initial period of creation. Its immense size and visibility make this omission especially striking. The monument is undeniably designed to be seen, yet no contemporary record proclaims its origin or patron. This third signature, the silence of the scribes, intersects powerfully with the first two, the erosion patterns and the head anomaly. Together, they form a triangulated argument for reconsidering the Sphinx's history. The vertical grooves on the body suggest exposure to rainfall far earlier than Kafir. The disproportionately small head, potentially reworked, indicates a later modification. The absence of contemporaneous inscriptions further suggests that the monument existed before the Old Kingdom scribes could document it. When these three lines of evidence are considered collectively, a picture emerges of a monument that spans multiple epochs, bridging a lost prehistoric era with a well-documented dynastic period. Further support comes from comparative studies of other ancient cultures. Monumental construction projects typically leave administrative and narrative traces. If the Sphinx were a product solely of Kafir's reign, the silence of scribes is highly anomalous. This absence becomes a form of evidence itself, a negative signature pointing toward the monument's pre-dynastic origin. It is a reminder that history is not solely composed of recorded events. It also resides in absence, in what is not said, in the gaps between inscriptions and official accounts. Even the inventory stele, with its ambiguous references to repairs and restoration, subtly reinforces this perspective. If Kafir's architects encountered a pre-existing Sphinx that had suffered millennia of exposure, their primary task may not have been creation, but preservation and modification. They would have adapted the monument to align with dynastic aesthetics, ensuring continuity in religious and cultural symbolism, while leaving the core structure intact. The Sphinx, in this reading, becomes both ancient artifact and dynastic emblem, a bridge across forgotten centuries. Ultimately, the silence of the scribes underscores the difficulty of reconstructing history based solely on texts. Monuments, climate records, geological evidence, and anomalies in proportion often tell a story that written records omit. The Sphinx stands as a silent witness, carrying evidence of a time when scribes had not yet recorded human endeavors, or perhaps when the civilization that carved it had vanished from memory. In this sense, the monument itself becomes the primary source, compelling researchers to read stone rather than scroll, to observe grooves rather than glyphs, and to interpret erosion rather than edict. By focusing on this silence, one begins to appreciate the Sphinx not just as a work of art, but as a historical document in itself. The lack of inscriptions, paradoxically, speaks volumes. It challenges the conventional narrative, invites scrutiny of assumptions, and encourages a broader view of human history, one that accounts for civilizations whose achievements may predate the known dynastic timeline. The Sphinx, in its quiet grandeur, demands that we consider a world before recorded history, a civilization lost to memory, but still etched into stone. As we step back from the Sphinx, allowing the erosion patterns, the disproportionate head, and the silent scribes to settle in our minds, we must anchor this investigation in concrete reality. The question arises, could a civilization capable of carving the Sphinx into the limestone plateau have existed 10,000 years ago? To answer this, we turn to one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, Göbekli Tepe. Located in southeastern Turkey, Göbekli Tepe predates Stonehenge by approximately 6,000 years and the pyramids of Giza by over 7,000 years. Excavated in the 1990s by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, the site revealed a complex of massive circular and rectangular megalithic structures, some weighing tens of tons, erected with remarkable precision. The most striking features of Göbekli Tepe are its T-shaped pillars, adorned with intricate carvings of animals, lions, snakes, boars, vultures, and abstract symbols representing a sophisticated symbolic language far beyond what was expected for a society that predated sedentary agriculture. What makes Göbekli Tepe profoundly relevant to the debate about the Sphinx is the sheer organizational sophistication of its builders. The scale of construction, the alignment of the pillars, and the craftsmanship indicate a coordinated workforce, knowledge of geometry, and a level of social organization previously thought impossible for 10,000 BC. It is a civilization that could mobilize hundreds of people, quarry massive stones, transport them across uneven terrain, and carve detailed symbolic motif skills entirely compatible with the creation of a monument like the Sphinx. Göbekli Tepe's dating, established through radiocarbon analysis, places its construction at roughly 96008-200 BCE, squarely within the African humid period, the same climatic window suggested by the water erosion on the Sphinx. This temporal overlap is crucial. It demonstrates that human societies not only existed at the time, but were capable of monumental architecture, symbolic thought, and sustained collaboration. It renders plausible the idea that the original Sphinx could have been carved during the same epoch, long before Kafur or the dynastic scribes arrived on the scene. The architectural design of Göbekli Tepe is equally remarkable. The circular enclosures, some over 20 meters in diameter, are oriented in ways that suggest awareness of astronomical cycles. Pillars often align with celestial events, hinting at an early understanding of the heavens. The carvings themselves are highly stylized, depicting animals and abstract motifs in forms that communicate symbolic, religious, or astronomical meaning. This demonstrates not merely technical skill, but an advanced cognitive framework capable of abstract thought and ceremonial expression. One cannot overstate the paradigm-shifting nature of Göbekli Tepe. Prior to its discovery, the prevailing narrative of human development suggested a linear progression. Small, nomadic hunter-gatherer groups slowly transitioned into agrarian societies, which then produced monumental architecture. Göbekli Tepe shattered this assumption. Here, hunter-gatherers, without evidence of settled farming, constructed a temple complex of massive scale. The implication is profound. Complex society, religious structures, and monumental art preceded agriculture, not the other way around. For those investigating the Sphinx, Göbekli Tepe provides a compelling analog. If hunter-gatherer societies could organize, quarry, and carve massive stones in Anatolia 12,000 years ago, there is no technical reason to dismiss the possibility of an advanced culture capable of carving the Sphinx during the African humid period. While Egyptologists have traditionally argued that monumental stonework required the bureaucratic machinery of dynastic Egypt, Göbekli Tepe suggests that the cognitive and social capabilities necessary for such projects existed far earlier. The carvings at Göbekli Tepe also reveal a symbolic complexity that resonates with the potential astronomical purpose of the Sphinx. Certain pillars appear to depict constellations, lunar phases, or celestial events, hinting at a sophisticated understanding of the night sky. If a society in southeastern Anatolia could integrate astronomy art and ritual in monumental stone, it is not implausible that a culture in North Africa could do the same, carving a colossal lion and aligning it with celestial events, such as the rising of the constellation Leo during the spring equinox. Furthermore, Göbekli Tepe demonstrates the resilience of stone monuments across millennia. Despite its age, approximately 12,000 years, the site has endured. Many pillars remain standing, carvings are legible, and the architectural layout is discernible. This reinforces the idea that stone monuments, once created, can serve as enduring witnesses to lost civilizations. The Sphinx, similarly carved from durable limestone, could have survived thousands of years of climatic shifts, sandstorms, and human activity, preserving the memory of a civilization long erased from historical records. Schmidt's excavation methods emphasized meticulous documentation of stratigraphy, carbon dating, and contextual artifacts, creating a robust chronological framework. Göbekli Tepe's structures were deliberately buried at some point, likely as part of a ritual closure, preserving the site for future generations. This intentional preservation echoes the Sphinx's role as a long-lasting sentinel, suggesting that ancient peoples understood both the symbolic and enduring nature of stone. The implications extend beyond the technical. Göbekli Tepe represents a cultural memory that predates dynastic history, a civilization with religious, symbolic, and intellectual sophistication erased by time yet traceable through its monuments. It challenges assumptions about the beginning of human civilization and opens the possibility that the Sphinx may also be a remnant of a lost culture, one that preceded recorded history and whose achievements have been largely forgotten. When comparing the two sites, several parallels emerge. Both feature monumental carving into stone. Both exhibit signs of intentional alignment and symbolic intent. Both survive in regions that underwent dramatic climatic shifts. Göbekli Tepe in Anatolia and the Sphinx in the Giza Plateau are separated by geography, but connected conceptually. They demonstrate that humans in the early Holocene were capable of organizing, designing, and executing large-scale, meaningful construction projects. Göbekli Tepe also challenges our assumptions about literacy, record keeping, and historical memory. The builders left no written records comparable to Egyptian hieroglyphs, yet they left a profound architectural and artistic legacy. Similarly, the Sphinx may represent an earlier civilization that lacked a textual tradition or whose records were lost yet still produced a monumental statement of culture, cosmology, and artistry. Both sites suggest that material culture can preserve knowledge and history even when written records are absent. In light of Göbekli Tepe, the argument for a pre-dynastic Sphinx gains traction. The physical evidence of water erosion, the disproportionate head, and the absence of contemporary records converge with what Göbekli Tepe teaches us. Advanced, organized, and symbolically sophisticated human activity was possible far earlier than previously assumed. By grounding the discussion in a real, well-documented archaeological case, we move beyond speculation and into a domain where prehistoric monumentality is demonstrably plausible. Ultimately, Göbekli Tepe serves as a smoking gun. It proves, beyond reasonable doubt, that humans 12,000 years ago possessed the skills, organization, and cultural sophistication required to carve massive stone monuments. It provides context for interpreting the Sphinx not as a product of a single dynastic period, but as potentially the culmination of a much older tradition, a remnant of a lost civilization whose architectural, symbolic, and intellectual accomplishments have largely vanished from the historical record. As we step back from the achievements at Göbekli Tepe, another question arises. If human societies were capable of constructing monumental architecture and practicing sophisticated symbolic and astronomical knowledge 12,000 years ago, why do we see no continuation of such civilizations? Why is there an apparent silence in the archaeological record until the rise of the dynastic kingdoms? The answer may lie in one of the most dramatic and mysterious climate events in Earth's recent history, the Younger Dryas Cataclysm. The Younger Dryas refers to a sudden and extreme climatic reversal that occurred around 12,800 years ago, at the tail end of the Pleistocene epoch. After the gradual warming that followed the last glacial maximum, the Earth experienced a sudden drop in temperatures, returning to near glacial conditions for approximately 1,200 years. This abrupt climatic regression is evident in ice core data, sedimentary records, and other geologic proxies around the globe. While the exact mechanisms remain debated, one of the most compelling hypotheses involves a cometary impact or airburst, which would have triggered widespread fires, atmospheric dust clouds, and rapid cooling. This cataclysmic event provides a plausible explanation for the disappearance or disruption of early advanced societies. Human groups capable of building Göbekli Tepe-level monuments may have thrived in a relatively stable, post-glacial environment. Yet the Younger Dryas would have imposed sudden ecological stress, megafauna extinctions, abrupt shifts in vegetation, loss of freshwater sources, and dramatic changes in resource availability. Communities accustomed to predictable environmental cycles were suddenly confronted with scarcity and chaos. If we situate the Sphinx within this context, a compelling narrative emerges. The African humid period, which created the green, rain-fed Sahara, provided the ideal conditions for the original carving of the Sphinx. The erosion patterns we observe on the body indicate exposure to prolonged rainfall, consistent with this verdant epoch. However, as the climate shifted toward aridity potentially accelerated by broader planetary events like the Younger Dryas, human societies would have faced immense challenges in maintaining monumental projects. It is plausible that the original civilization responsible for the Sphinx may have been partially or wholly disrupted by these rapid environmental changes. Archaeological evidence supports the notion that human cultures experienced significant upheaval during this period. Sites across North America, Europe, and the Near East show abrupt shifts in settlement patterns, technological approaches, and subsistence strategies. In some regions, large constructions are abandoned, while new, smaller-scale communities emerge in more resource-rich locations. Göbekli Tepe itself appears to have been intentionally buried toward the end of this period, suggesting a ritualized closure that may coincide with ecological and societal stressors. The Younger Dryas Cataclysm also provides a potential explanation for the loss of written or symbolic records. Societies capable of monumental construction may have lacked a durable written system, or may have experienced catastrophic population decline, erasing much of their cultural memory. The Sphinx, carved in stone, may represent one of the few surviving remnants of such a lost culture. The juxtaposition of advanced monumentality with the absence of contemporary documentation aligns strikingly with the patterns observed at Göbekli Tepe and other pre-agricultural sites. Beyond climate and archaeology, the Younger Dryas hypothesis intersects with geological observations. Cometary or meteoritic impacts leave evidence in the form of microspherules, high-temperature melt glass, and unusual chemical signatures in sedimentary layers dated to this period. These markers have been found across continents, suggesting a global or hemispheric scale event capable of reshaping ecosystems and human societies. The implications are profound. A sudden, global catastrophe could have interrupted the continuity of knowledge and culture, erasing evidence of advanced prehistoric achievements from the historical record. For proponents of a pre-dynastic Sphinx, the Younger Dryas offers a narrative framework. The monument may have been carved by a sophisticated culture flourishing during the African humid period, only to endure the onset of catastrophic aridity and environmental stress. Later dynastic rulers, encountering a pre-existing and partially eroded monument, could have restored the head and repurposed the statue within their own symbolic and political systems. This scenario reconciles the physical evidence of water erosion, the disproportionate head, and the absence of Old Kingdom inscriptions. Interestingly, the Younger Dryas also intersects with astronomical cycles, a connection that may be relevant to the Sphinx's alignment with celestial phenomena. Some theories suggest that the event was triggered by a comet impact in the outer solar system, producing debris that temporarily altered the Earth's sky. Civilizations of the time may have incorporated these celestial events into their symbolic or religious systems, carving monuments like the Sphinx or Göbekli Tepe pillars to reflect cosmic cycles or to commemorate cataclysmic occurrences. Moreover, the Younger Dryas provides context for understanding the sudden disappearance of other early monumental sites. Across Eurasia, North Africa, and the Near East, evidence points to widespread abandonment, shifts in population centers, and changes in technological strategies. This pattern is consistent with a catastrophic event of the scale hypothesized for the Younger Dryas. In this light, the Sphinx may represent not merely a surviving statue, but a witness to a global transition, a silent sentinel bridging prehistoric accomplishment with recorded history. The Younger Dryas narrative also highlights the resilience of human ingenuity. While catastrophic events may have disrupted civilizations, the knowledge and skills developed by these early societies likely informed later developments. The dynastic Egyptians, for instance, may have inherited architectural concepts, symbolic motifs, or astronomical insights transmitted through oral tradition, practical experience, or the enduring presence of monuments like the Sphinx. The continuity of monumental construction, despite apparent cultural discontinuity, suggests a latent persistence of technical and symbolic knowledge that survived even the most disruptive events. In conclusion, the Younger Dryas cataclysm provides a compelling backdrop for understanding the potential antiquity of the Sphinx. By integrating geological, archaeological, and climatological evidence, we begin to see a plausible scenario. An advanced prehistoric culture, thriving during the African humid period, carved the Sphinx. The sudden onset of climatic upheaval, environmental stress, and possibly cometary impact disrupted these societies, erasing much of their history and leaving only durable stone monuments as evidence. Later, dynastic Egyptians, encountering this ancient work, may have restored and repurposed it, embedding their own identity while preserving the remnants of a lost civilization. In this context, the Sphinx is not merely an Old Kingdom creation, but a bridge across time, connecting us to a civilization that predates written history, survived cataclysm, and bequeathed a legacy encoded in stone. The erosion patterns, the anomalous head, and the silence of the scribes now gain additional significance when viewed against the backdrop of global catastrophe and cultural disruption. Together with Göbekli Tepe, the Younger Dryas hypothesis reinforces the plausibility of the Sphinx, whose origins stretch back into the deep past, challenging our assumptions and inviting us to reconsider the timeline of human achievement. At this point, we have journeyed from the limestone grooves of the Sphinx, reading the silent testimony of rain and wind, to the curious anomaly of its disproportionately small head, and the profound absence of contemporary records. We then broadened our gaze to the wider world of early human achievement, exploring Göbekli Tepe, a temple complex that shatters conventional timelines, and confronted the catastrophic forces of the Younger Dryas, a climate upheaval capable of erasing entire civilizations from memory. It is here, standing at the intersection of evidence and imagination, that we arrive at a moment of reflection. What we have seen so far challenges the foundations of established history, yet it is grounded in empirical observation. Erosion patterns, anomalous proportions, ancient architectural feats, and geological cataclysms. Each piece forms a thread in a tapestry that hints at a lost chapter of human civilization, one that may have left the Sphinx as a solitary witness to a world we barely understand. And now, dear viewer, this is where you are invited to pause, to let the enormity of the journey settle in. The story of the Sphinx, when connected to global events and parallel sites, is not just about questioning a statue. It is about reconsidering our assumptions about human history itself. It is about understanding that history, like the wind-sculpted limestone of Giza, carries the marks of forces far older than we often imagine. Science is not a static collection of facts. It is a living, evolving narrative. Discoveries such as Göbekli Tepe compel us to reevaluate what we think we know, to question timelines we have long taken for granted, and to consider the possibility that civilizations capable of monumental achievement existed far earlier than recorded history acknowledges. The Sphinx, silent and enigmatic, invites the same reconsideration. If this exploration has sparked your curiosity, if the idea that our understanding of history might be incomplete resonates with you, then consider subscribing to continue this journey. Each story, each monument, each anomaly is a door into the depths of human antiquity, a world of wonder, mystery, and questions yet to be answered. As we prepare to move forward, allow yourself to imagine the Sphinx not simply as a product of the Old Kingdom, but as a sentinel of lost ages watching over a green and fertile Giza, a landscape that predates dynastic Egypt, shaped by a civilization now vanished into the folds of prehistory. In the next segment, we will step beyond the evidence into the realm of possibility, exploring what the world might have looked like, who its people could have been, and what messages the Sphinx may still carry across millennia. Close your eyes and imagine the Giza Plateau not as an arid expanse of dust and rock, but as a lush, verdant landscape teeming with life. This was the Sahara of the African humid period, a time when rainfall was abundant, rivers flowed with consistency, and the Nile was part of a wider network of fertile wetlands. The wind that now sculpts sand into waves once carried the fragrance of flowering grasses, the calls of wildlife, and the gentle rustling of reeds along thriving watercourses. In this world, the Sphinx was conceived, carved into the limestone not as a solitary curiosity, but as part of a broader cultural and spiritual landscape. The erosion we see today, the deep, vertical grooves in the limestone walls, was shaped by millennia of seasonal rains, storms that would have been familiar to the original sculptors. To them, water was a life-giving force, a sculptor of the land, and a symbol of renewal and cyclical balance. The Sphinx may have been envisioned as a guardian of these waters, a monumental sentinel overlooking fertile plains where human communities could flourish. Imagine the people themselves, skilled stonemasons, astronomer priests, and builders with a profound understanding of the natural world. They were not mere laborers. They were visionaries, capable of organizing large-scale projects, coordinating labor, and planning with precision. Their knowledge of stone, its durability, and its susceptibility to erosion would have informed their work, ensuring that the monument could endure through centuries of environmental change. The sheer scale of the Sphinx suggests a society with both the intellectual and practical resources to undertake projects of extraordinary ambition. This civilization likely had a deep understanding of celestial cycles. The positioning of the Sphinx may not have been arbitrary. It may have been designed to face its own celestial counterpart, the constellation of Leo, during the spring equinox, marking the age of the lion. Such an alignment suggests not only astronomical knowledge, but also a symbolic or religious significance, connecting human activity on Earth with cosmic rhythms. The Sphinx was, perhaps, a monumental calendar, a marker of celestial events, and a sacred guardian of the landscape. Consider the social structure of this world. Unlike later empires focused on conquest and expansion, this society may have been oriented around harmony with the environment and the cosmos. Communities were likely small but highly organized, their efforts concentrated on sustainable living, spiritual observances, and cultural achievements. Monumental architecture was not merely functional or political. It was a language of symbols, a statement of identity, and an expression of shared values. The Sphinx, in this sense, was both a practical guardian of the land and a cultural beacon, embodying the collective knowledge and aspirations of its people. The flora and fauna of the Giza Plateau at this time were diverse. Herds of grazing animals roamed the plains, attracting predators and forming a dynamic ecosystem. Birds filled the skies, and the land was interwoven with seasonal wetlands and forested corridors. These environmental riches would have supported human settlement, enabling populations to engage in construction projects of immense scale. The Sphinx, towering over this vibrant landscape, was not a lonely figure. It was a living part of a thriving ecological and cultural system. In addition to the practical and symbolic, the original purpose of the Sphinx may have been deeply spiritual. It may have served as a temple or a ceremonial site, a place where human beings could connect with forces greater than themselves: the sun, the stars, the cycles of water and earth. Rituals may have been performed in its shadow, integrating astronomy, art, and spiritual practice in a manner that is difficult for us to fully reconstruct. Yet the scale and precision of the monument speak to a culture that valued such integration, recognizing the profound relationship between human activity and cosmic order. The erosion patterns we observe today hint at a world where water was a sculptor rather than a threat. Seasonal rains would have shaped the limestone gently, reminding the builders of the impermanence of all things, yet inspiring them to leave behind something enduring. They understood that their work would outlast individual lifetimes, becoming a legacy for generations to come. The Sphinx, in this green and thriving Sahara, was both a practical sentinel and a philosophical statement, a testament to foresight, knowledge, and reverence for the cycles of nature. In this vision, the Sphinx is no longer merely a statue, but a central figure in a vibrant, interconnected world. It is surrounded by settlements, ceremonial structures, and natural features that together create a living landscape. It stands not in isolation, but as the focal point of a society deeply attuned to its environment, aware of celestial rhythms, and capable of monumental achievement. The monument is both a guardian of the land and a message across time, a symbol of a civilization whose story has largely vanished from memory, but whose enduring presence speaks through stone. If we step back from the Sphinx itself and imagine the people who carved it, we begin to see a society unlike any that would emerge in later millennia. This was not a civilization defined by empire, conquest, or hierarchical domination. Instead, it may have been a community organized around harmony with each other, with the environment, and with the cosmos. Their priorities were likely centered on sustainability, knowledge, spirituality, and the shared effort of monumental creation. Unlike later dynasties that relied on bureaucracy and centralized control, this culture may have been fluid yet highly coordinated. Social cohesion could have been maintained not through coercion or rigid hierarchy, but through shared purpose and collective ritual. Monumental projects, such as the Sphinx or similar stone structures, may have served as focal points for community identity, spiritual observance, and practical cohesion, uniting individuals under a common vision that transcended personal gain. The architects of the Sphinx were likely astronomers, priests, and stonemasons, combined into a single cultural identity. Their understanding of celestial cycles and seasonal changes would have informed both spiritual rituals and practical activities, such as agriculture, migration patterns, or ceremonial timing. They were intimately familiar with the sky, reading it as a text filled with meaning, aligning their monumental work to cosmic rhythms in ways that resonate with the astronomical alignments we see in the Sphinx and comparable structures elsewhere. This society may have had a radically different sense of time and legacy. While modern civilizations often measure history in centuries, these people may have conceived of cultural endurance in millennia. The Sphinx was a statement across ages, carved with the intention that it would outlast generations and carry messages not only to their immediate descendants, but to any observer who could endure the passage of time. Such a mindset reflects a profound understanding of human impermanence and the enduring nature of stone as a medium for cultural memory. Ethically and spiritually, this culture might have embraced principles that we would recognize as a profound connection to nature. They likely understood the interdependence of ecosystems, the necessity of sustainable resource use, and the cyclical nature of life and death. The carvings at Göbekli Tepe and the design of the Sphinx suggest an awareness of symbolic meaning and cosmic order that transcends mere practical survival, pointing to a philosophy of interconnectedness that guided both labor and ritual. Their art, architecture, and monuments were not solely functional. They were expressions of worldview. Every detail, the alignment of a pillar, the shape of a carving, the orientation of a monumental sculpture, was infused with meaning. The Sphinx in this context is not simply a lion or a pharaoh's face. It is a complex narrative encoded in stone, expressing cosmology identity and the values of a civilization that understood both the material and spiritual dimensions of existence. This lost humanity may also have placed great emphasis on education and oral transmission of knowledge. Without writing systems as we know them, traditions, techniques, and cosmic understanding were passed through apprenticeships, communal observation, and ritual. Stone monuments themselves functioned as repositories of knowledge-timeless texts for future generations, capable of conveying meaning even after spoken language and cultural context were lost. The Sphinx thus becomes both monument and medium, communicating across millennia in a silent, eloquent language. Another defining characteristic of this society may have been its non-imperialistic worldview. Unlike the dynastic Egyptians who built pyramids as expressions of power and dominance, the builders of the Sphinx may have focused on balance and observation, attuning their culture to environmental and cosmic cycles rather than territorial expansion. Monumental constructions were acts of reverence, teaching tools, and communal statements rather than propaganda. The civilization that carved the Sphinx may have valued longevity, harmony, and continuity over conquest or accumulation. Moreover, this humanity was deeply resilient. They faced environmental changes, climate shifts, and perhaps even global catastrophes like the Younger Dryas. Yet their knowledge, skills, and cultural expressions persisted in forms durable enough to survive the millennia. The Sphinx itself stands as a testament to this resilience. Carved from limestone, weathered by rain and wind, it embodies both the triumphs and vulnerabilities of its creators. Their ingenuity was rooted in a profound understanding of materials, landscape, and the long arc of time. In envisioning this different kind of humanity, we must also confront what has been lost. The absence of written records, the disappearance of settlements, and the scarcity of artifacts challenge us to reconstruct their story imaginatively yet rigorously. What we can infer, however, is striking. A society capable of monumental work, celestial observation, spiritual depth, and communal organization, all achieved without the trappings of later states or empires. They remind us that human intelligence and creativity are not confined to the historical periods documented in textbooks. Ultimately, this society invites us to reconsider our assumptions about progress and sophistication. Civilization is often equated with urban centers, writing, and hierarchical governance. Yet the builders of the Sphinx demonstrate that complexity can exist in different forms through collective knowledge, architectural mastery, spiritual depth, and harmony with nature. They challenge us to broaden our understanding of what it means to be human, what it means to build, and what it means to leave a legacy that endures across the millennia. The Sphinx is more than limestone carved into the form of a lion with a human face. It is a messenger across time, a silent witness to a civilization whose existence challenges the boundaries of our recorded history. Standing on the Giza plateau, it speaks in a language of stone, wind, and reign one that transcends the written record, transcends dynasties, and defies the assumptions of modern scholarship. Consider the deliberate scale of the monument. Every measure, every contour, was designed to endure. The Sphinx was never meant to be fleeting. It was conceived with the understanding that generations would rise and fall, that cultures would come and go, yet its presence would remain. In this sense, it communicates a profound lesson, that human achievement is not always ephemeral, but can endure as a silent testament to ingenuity and vision. The original builders understood the value of permanence, and in doing so, they spoke to every future observer who would look upon it. The erosion patterns, the incongruity of the head and body, and the enigmatic lack of contemporary inscriptions all contribute to the message. The Sphinx conveys that history is not a linear narrative. It is a layered, complex interplay of events, triumphs, disasters, and survival. Its very anomalies provoke reflection. Why does the head seem small in proportion to the body? Why is there no definitive record of its creation in Old Kingdom texts? These questions are not flaws. They are deliberate prompts, designed or perhaps naturally produced by time, to encourage deeper investigation, curiosity, and humility. The Sphinx also communicates the resilience of human knowledge. Its presence attests to a civilization capable of monumental thought and labor, one that thrived in the African humid period, faced environmental upheaval during the Younger Dryas, and yet left behind structures that continue to challenge our understanding. Even if the people themselves vanished, their creation persists, offering a tangible connection to the past. This teaches us that human legacy is often encoded not in words, but in enduring works, capable of transmitting ideas, beliefs, and achievements across millennia. Moreover, the Sphinx serves as a reminder that our species is capable of extraordinary foresight and imagination. To envision a sculpture that aligns with celestial events, endures environmental stress, and embodies spiritual or symbolic meaning requires an understanding of time and space far beyond the individual lifespan. The creators of the Sphinx grasped concepts that we still struggle to comprehend fully. Their achievement communicates not only technical skill, but also the profound capacity of humanity to think across generations, to act with awareness of the unseen future. In this light, the Sphinx becomes a bridge between eras. It connects us to a lost civilization, one that flourished when the Sahara was a green savanna, when rivers fed fertile plains, and when human societies could organize monumental work without the trappings of written records or imperial bureaucracy. Its gaze, fixed eternally toward the rising sun, may have been intended as a cosmic alignment, a symbolic witness to celestial cycles, or a marker for the age of the lion. But beyond any literal interpretation, it communicates a deeper, philosophical message that humanity's past is richer, more mysterious, and more resilient than we often acknowledge. The Sphinx's endurance also invites reflection on the nature of cultural memory. Societies rise and fall, records are lost, and yet certain achievements persist. This teaches us humility. Our own historical narrative, constructed from fragments of evidence, is likely incomplete. The Sphinx reminds us that human history is not solely defined by what is documented, but also by what survives in stone, earth, and memory. In essence, it is a monument to the unseen and unrecorded, a testament to the ingenuity, creativity, and spiritual depth of humans long gone. Furthermore, the Sphinx challenges the viewer to consider the continuity of human aspiration. Just as the original builders sought to connect with cosmic forces, we, in studying and interpreting the monument, continue this pursuit. We attempt to understand, to decode, to align ourselves with the wisdom of ancestors who operated in a world that predates dynastic Egypt by millennia. In this way, the Sphinx becomes not only a relic of the past, but an active participant in our own intellectual and spiritual journey. Finally, the Sphinx conveys a sense of patience and silence. Unlike texts or spoken words, which are fleeting, the stone endures quietly, observing the passage of time. Its message is not immediate or explicit. It requires contemplation, reflection, and a willingness to listen. In this, it teaches an essential human lesson: the value of observing, questioning, and allowing time to reveal meaning. The Sphinx is both a teacher and a mirror, reflecting not only the lost civilization that created it, but also the questions, curiosity, and determination of every observer who seeks to understand it. In conclusion, the Sphinx across millennia embodies a profound communication. It reminds us that the story of humanity is far larger and more intricate than the chronicles of recorded history suggest. It teaches us to seek knowledge beyond texts, to respect the persistence of legacy, and to recognize that extraordinary civilizations may have flourished long before the familiar monuments of history. The Sphinx's message is clear. Our past is a vast landscape filled with achievements, mysteries, and lessons, waiting for those willing to see and listen. As our journey through time nears its close, it is worth pausing to trace the path we have traveled. A path carved not only in stone, but in the questions and revelations that have emerged from careful observation, imagination, and scientific inquiry. We began beside the Great Sphinx itself, feeling the rough limestone under our hands and noticing the scars left by millennia of rain. These vertical grooves, etched deep into the enclosure walls, told a story that the desert winds alone could not have written. From the very first moment, we were confronted with a question that shakes the foundations of conventional history. If not the Old Kingdom pharaohs, then who and when? We then examined the body of the Sphinx and its anomalies. The head, smaller than expected, disproportionate to the grandeur of the lion-like body, suggested restoration or modification over time. Perhaps the original monument was a complete lion or another form entirely, its original visage lost to the erosive forces of nature. This observation urged us to reconsider the narrative that Kafur alone could be responsible for the monument, revealing a layer of human history that may extend far beyond the familiar dynastic timeline. The conspicuous silence of contemporary scribes further intensified the mystery. Where were the records, the inscriptions, the accounts of the largest monolithic statue on Earth? Unlike the pyramids, whose construction was well documented, the Sphinx appeared absent from the Old Kingdom chronicles. The later inventory stele hinted that the Sphinx may already have been ancient in the time of Kafur, requiring repair rather than initial construction. This anomaly prompted us to look beyond the surface of history, to question the assumption that written documentation alone defines the past. In our search for corroborating evidence, we traveled beyond Egypt to sites such as Göbekli Tepe. There, massive stone pillars adorned with complex animal carvings and astronomical alignments revealed a civilization capable of sophisticated architectural planning and symbolic expression some 12,000 years ago. The existence of such a society demonstrated that monumental construction and intellectual depth existed far earlier than previously acknowledged. Göbekli Tepe provided a lens through which the Sphinx's age and purpose could be reconsidered, offering a tangible example of advanced human capability in prehistoric times. We also examined the broader environmental and geological context. The Younger Dryas cataclysm, a sudden climatic reversal triggered by a hypothesized comet, impact, or airburst, posed a possible explanation for the disappearance of early civilizations. It suggested a world in which advanced human communities, capable of monumental construction and complex organization, may have been wiped from the collective memory by global catastrophe. The Sphinx, carved from enduring limestone, stands as a witness to this lost world, bridging the gap between what was known, what was destroyed, and what survives to inspire inquiry today. Then we allowed ourselves to step into imagination, reconstructing the Giza plateau as it may have appeared thousands of years before Kafur, a lush, fertile savanna nourished by the African humid period. Rivers and wetlands supported diverse wildlife and human settlement, creating a setting where monumental work was not only possible, but symbolically significant. The Sphinx, in this context, was more than a statue. It was a marker of cosmic cycles, a sentinel of knowledge, and a statement of human aspiration and harmony with nature. We explored the society behind the monument, envisioning a culture that prized collective endeavor, astronomical understanding, and spiritual insight. These were people oriented not toward conquest, but toward balance and understanding. They passed knowledge orally, encoded wisdom in stone, and created lasting monuments designed to communicate across millennia. Their values and social structures challenge our assumptions about what constitutes civilization, demonstrating that complexity and sophistication are not always tied to hierarchical empires or written records. Finally, we considered the Sphinx as a message across the ages. Its enduring presence, anomalous features, and silent testimony invite reflection on the continuity of human knowledge and achievement. It teaches us that history is not linear or complete, but layered and complex. The monument stands as a bridge between the forgotten past and the present, urging us to observe carefully, question assumptions, and embrace curiosity. It embodies both the achievements and the mysteries of humanity, reminding us that even in the absence of records, human ingenuity and aspiration can endure, leaving a legacy for those willing to see and listen. Through these observations, analyses, and imaginative reconstructions, we gain a holistic view of the Sphinx, not simply as a relic of the Old Kingdom, but as a sentinel of time, a monument to lost civilizations, and a conduit for human inquiry. The journey from empirical evidence erosion patterns, proportional anomalies, and absent texts to the speculative reconstruction of landscapes and societies highlights the depth of what remains to be understood. The Sphinx is, above all, a teacher, inviting us to consider both the power and fragility of human achievement, the vastness of time, and the enduring mystery of our origins. The Great Sphinx is not merely a statue. It is a mirror held up to the deepest questions about who we are, where we come from, and what it means to leave a mark upon the earth. For thousands of years, it has watched silently over the Giza plateau, enduring rain, wind, and human curiosity alike. Its silent gaze forces us to confront a reality that is as humbling as it is inspiring. The past is not fixed, and our understanding of it is often incomplete, shaped by assumptions and filtered through the fragments of surviving records. In contemplating the Sphinx, we confront the limits of knowledge. The monument challenges the notion that history can be neatly categorized, or that human achievement is strictly confined to periods we have documented. Its erosion patterns, its disproportionate head, and the silence of contemporary scribes collectively suggest a just timeline that stretches far beyond the reign of Khafor, reaching into an age when human ingenuity may have flourished under circumstances entirely lost to us. In this sense, the Sphinx is not just a relic. It is an argument, a subtle yet powerful statement that history is vaster than the evidence we possess, and more profound than the narratives we are taught. The philosophical weight of the Sphinx lies in its ability to evoke wonder and doubt simultaneously. It compels us to embrace uncertainty, to recognize that the past is a living dialogue between the evidence that survives and the imagination that interprets it. The monument asks us to consider that civilizations capable of extraordinary knowledge and monumental construction may have existed before we believed such feats possible. These civilizations may have left little trace beyond stone, yet the endurance of those stones allows us millennia later to reconstruct not just their architecture, but glimpses of their worldview, their values, and their connection to the cosmos. Through the lens of the Sphinx, we are invited to reconceptualize the human story. We are forced to move beyond a linear progression, from primitive to advanced, understanding instead that human sophistication has appeared in cycles, sometimes rising and disappearing under the forces of nature, catastrophe, or time itself. The Sphinx embodies resilience, a testament to the capacity of humans to create meaning and order in the face of impermanence. It stands as a reminder that the achievements of our species are not always adequately recorded or appreciated, yet they endure in forms that continue to speak across ages. Moreover, the Sphinx teaches us about the nature of human memory and cultural legacy. Our collective memory is fragmented, subject to erosion as profound as the limestone walls themselves. Texts are lost, languages fade, and entire civilizations vanish. Yet the traces they leave can challenge our assumptions and expand our understanding. In this sense, the Sphinx is a guardian of memory, silently preserving the evidence of human capability and inviting reflection on the temporal fragility of culture and the endurance of monumental human thought. The Sphinx also poses an existential question. If a civilization capable of such knowledge and artistry could vanish almost entirely, what does that say about our own civilization? Are we merely a temporary chapter in a vast continuum of human ingenuity, vulnerable to the same forces of nature, catastrophe, and time that erased others before us? The monument encourages humility, urging us to recognize that the achievements we celebrate today may one day be all that remains for future observers, who will reconstruct our story from the artifacts that survive. Yet there is hope embedded in this reflection. The Sphinx does not merely remind us of fragility. It testifies to human persistence, vision, and the capacity to reach across the ages. Its creation required foresight, precision, and an understanding of forces far larger than the individual. The builders worked not for immediate recognition, but for legacy, a message that could endure centuries and millennia. In doing so, they left behind a challenge and an invitation to observe carefully, think deeply, and appreciate the vastness of human possibility. Philosophically, the Sphinx encourages us to think beyond utility and material gain. Its existence suggests that human creativity is not solely motivated by necessity or survival, but also by curiosity, spirituality, and the desire to engage with the cosmos. Monumental work like the Sphinx represents a dialogue between human beings and the universe, a conversation encoded in stone, aligned with celestial cycles and imbued with meaning. This invites us to consider our own projects, endeavors, and aspirations in a broader temporal and cosmic context. What are we building that will endure? How do our actions echo across time, beyond immediate recognition or reward? The monument's enigmatic nature also serves as a reminder of the importance of questioning authority and established narratives. Mainstream Egyptology has long placed the Sphinx firmly within the reign of Khafre, yet careful observation, geological study, and comparative analysis with other ancient sites invite alternative interpretations. In this way, the Sphinx encourages a mindset of critical inquiry, openness to new evidence, and humility before the complexity of the past. The pursuit of knowledge is not linear. It requires patience, reflection, and a willingness to embrace ambiguity. Ultimately, the Sphinx embodies a profound meditation on time, mortality, and the human impulse to create meaning. Its gaze stretches across millennia, connecting us with a lost civilization and reminding us that our understanding of the world is provisional, shaped by both discovery and imagination. It teaches that true wisdom lies not merely in accumulating facts, but in cultivating a sense of wonder, perspective, and reverence for the vast continuum of human existence. The Sphinx stands as both a monument and a mentor. It asks us to consider not only what was, but also what might have been. It invites us to imagine societies that flourished, to reconstruct landscapes lost to climate and catastrophe, and to reflect on the enduring questions of human purpose and aspiration. In doing so, it becomes a bridge between the empirical and the philosophical, the concrete and the imaginative, the past and the present. Through this grand reflection, we recognize that the Sphinx's greatest gift is not in the answers it provides, but in the questions it inspires. It urges us to think expansively about time, civilization, and human potential. It reminds us that history is not a straight line, but a vast, unexplored landscape filled with peaks of achievement, valleys of mystery, and hidden chapters waiting to be discovered. The Sphinx teaches us that curiosity, observation, and imagination are as vital to understanding the past as they are to shaping the future. The Sphinx, in its silent vigil, bridges more than time. It bridges the very essence of human experience. It asks us to consider not only the civilizations that may have come before us, but also the nature of humanity itself. Our curiosity, our resilience, and our persistent quest to understand the world and our place within it. This connection to the human condition is subtle, yet profound, emerging from the monument's endurance and the questions it evokes. At first glance, the Sphinx may appear as a simple sentinel carved from limestone. Yet beneath its weathered surface lies a testament to human ambition, creativity, and foresight. It embodies the universal drive to leave a mark, to create something that endures beyond our own lifespan, and to communicate with those who follow. In this sense, the Sphinx is not merely a relic of an ancient past. It is a reflection of a timeless human instinct, the desire to be remembered, to reach across the void of time and to participate in a dialogue with the future. Through its form and function, the Sphinx also highlights the tension between human fragility and resilience. Societies rise and fall, civilizations vanish, yet certain works endure. The Sphinx survives centuries of environmental change, human interference, and the relentless march of time. Its survival mirrors the resilience of the human spirit, which persists despite catastrophe, error, and forgetfulness. In contemplating the Sphinx, we are reminded that our own endeavors, though often ephemeral, participate in a continuum that stretches across generations, linking past, present, and future in ways we may never fully comprehend. Moreover, the Sphinx speaks to the fragility and imperfection of human memory. Just as the original builder's culture may have been erased from the record, so too are countless human achievements, insights, and lives lost to time. Yet, what survives, stone, artifact, and story, offers a conduit through which the human spirit endures. This duality between what is lost and what remains resonates deeply with the human experience. We are both ephemeral and eternal, subject to decay, yet capable of leaving legacies that transcend individual lifespans. The monument also connects to a universal sense of wonder and inquiry that defines the human condition. Every generation that gazes upon the Sphinx asks questions. Who built it? Why? How? These questions are not simply about history. They are about the human impulse to seek understanding, to explore the unknown, and to situate ourselves within a vast and often incomprehensible universe. In this way, the Sphinx functions as both teacher and companion, guiding us toward reflection on the scope of human capability and the mysteries that remain unsolved. Importantly, the Sphinx reminds us that humanity's achievements are rarely linear or confined to our expectations. The civilizations that may have preceded Egypt, evidenced by erosion patterns, anomalies, and sites like Göbekli Tepe, suggest that intelligence, artistry, and social sophistication have emerged in cycles, sometimes rising and disappearing under forces beyond human control. The Sphinx is thus a symbol of both continuity and impermanence, a reminder that human potential is vast, but not guaranteed. It compels us to cherish and protect the knowledge, culture, and wisdom that define our era. This reflection naturally extends into a philosophical meditation on the purpose of human endeavor. The Sphinx is not a monument of conquest or domination. It was not built to impress neighboring states or assert political authority. Instead, it reflects the profound human drive to observe, understand, and leave a lasting imprint on the cosmos. The act of creation itself, imbued with meaning, aligned with celestial rhythms, and constructed with care, becomes a mirror for the human condition, illustrating that the pursuit of knowledge, beauty, and connection transcends utility or survival. The connection between the Sphinx and humanity also touches on the emotional dimensions of our species. There is a quiet empathy embedded in the act of reconstruction. Imagining the lost civilizations, contemplating the vast stretches of time and sensing the continuity of human aspiration across millennia. This empathy fosters humility, reminding us that we are part of a larger story, one that is still unfolding, and that the achievements and struggles of others documented or lost inform and enrich our own experience. Ultimately, the Sphinx embodies the tension between human impermanence and the enduring nature of our achievements. It asks us to consider how we define significance, how we measure legacy, and how we understand the past in relation to the present. The monument's silent voice urges us to reflect not only on history as it is recorded, but also on history as it is lived, remembered, and imagined. It encourages a holistic understanding of the human condition, one that integrates curiosity, creativity, resilience, and ethical reflection. By contemplating the Sphinx in this way, we cultivate a deeper awareness of our own place in time. We recognize that our actions, ideas, and creations are threads in a tapestry that stretches far beyond the span of individual lifetimes. The Sphinx's gaze, eternal and unyielding, reminds us that the pursuit of understanding, the act of creation, and the desire to connect across generations are central to what it means to be human. In its silence, it teaches, challenges, and inspires, offering a profound meditation on continuity, legacy, and the shared experience of existence. The wind whispers softly across the sands of the Giza plateau, carrying stories of millennia. Each grain, a tiny time capsule, reflects sunlight and casts shadows that shift like the memories of forgotten ages. Here, amid the silence, the Great Sphinx is no longer just a monument. It becomes a companion, a guide into the quiet expanses of both time and imagination. Its gaze stretches toward the horizon, unbroken and eternal, inviting you to pause, breathe, and feel the rhythm of history in your own body. Let your breath slow, aligning with the subtle pulse of the desert. Inhale the warmth of the sun-baked stones. Exhale the noise of your modern life, the clatter of schedules and obligations. With each breath, imagine the Sphinx standing through the ages, watching civilizations rise and fall, witnessing the cycles of the Nile, the green savanna, and the eventual return of the desert. It has seen the world change in ways that we cannot fully comprehend, yet it remains steadfast, a stone witness to endurance, patience, and quiet reflection. Feel the textures beneath your hands as if they were your own. The limestone is rough, scarred by the passage of countless centuries, yet smooth in areas worn by time and attention. Imagine running your fingers along the ancient enclosure walls, tracing the vertical grooves carved by rain thousands of years before the first pharaohs. These marks are not merely erosion. They are the fingerprints of a world long vanished, a tactile connection to forces far beyond human control. They invite contemplation of impermanence, resilience, and the beauty found in the interplay of natural forces and human craft. Notice the warmth of the sun on your skin, the cool shadows cast by the Sphinx's massive form. Let your eyes follow the contours of its body, the elegance of its lion form, and the enigmatic expression of its face. The proportions, imperfect yet deliberate, hint at restoration, reimagining, and the passage of time. In this stillness, allow yourself to sense the vast expanse of human history, the civilizations that flourished, the societies that vanished, and the legacies that remain. The Sphinx is both marker and mirror, reflecting what endures and what is lost, inviting you to see yourself as part of this continuum. As you listen to the wind, hear it as a voice of time itself. It speaks not in words, but in rhythms, in whispers that trace the outline of lost knowledge, forgotten landscapes, and civilizations erased by climate, catastrophe, or simple neglect. The wind is patient, persistent, and unhurried, much like the stone guardian before you. Let it teach you to slow, to observe, and to contemplate the intricate tapestry of cause and effect, creation and decay, memory and loss that forms the essence of human existence. Imagine the desert stretching endlessly beyond the Sphinx, a canvas of gold and shadow, where light and time intertwine. The silence is profound, yet it is not empty. It hums with the echoes of thousands of dawns and sunsets. Feel the connection to every observer who has stood here before you, from ancient priests to modern explorers, all drawn by the magnetism of this enduring presence. Each observer adds a layer of thought, interpretation, and wonder, continuing the dialogue that the Sphinx has carried silently through the ages. Now, envision the Sphinx's gaze upon the horizon, the place where sun meets earth, where day is born from night. Let your mind drift toward this horizon, imagining the flow of time, the cycles of nature, and the invisible threads that connect past, present, and future. The Sphinx is a sentinel, a constant amidst change, reminding us that some truths, like curiosity, wonder, and creativity, are eternal. In its immense silence, feel the invitation to merge with this timeless rhythm, to let the vastness of history settle within you, and to embrace a sense of profound continuity. Allow the wind, the stone, and the horizon to become your own meditation. Let the Sphinx's presence guide you to stillness, patience, and reflection. Its vigil, spanning millennia, becomes a meditation on endurance, the beauty of imperfection, and the quiet power of observation. As the sun dips toward the horizon, imagine the sands glowing softly, the monument casting long shadows, and the silence deepening, carrying with it the weight and wisdom of countless generations. In this meditative state, the Sphinx ceases to be a distant relic. It becomes a companion on your inner journey, a teacher of patience, observation, and humility. Its eternal gaze invites you to reflect on your own place and time, the fleeting nature of human life, and the enduring value of creativity, inquiry, and memory. You are connected to the past, to the present, and to the legacy of those who have shaped the world long before you arrived. The desert settles into profound silence. The sun has dipped below the horizon, painting the sands with colors that shift from gold to amber, then deep into the soft violet of twilight. The wind is the only voice now, whispering across the dunes, over the plateau, and around the silent figure of the Great Sphinx. Its immense form remains steadfast, guarding secrets of millennia, watching over a world that continues to evolve and change. Stand beside the Sphinx one last time and feel the weight of its presence. The limestone under your hand, the grooves carved by ancient rain, and the disproportionate head all speak in subtle language, inviting you to reflect on time, impermanence, and the endurance of human aspiration. Here, at this threshold between past and present, you are reminded that history is not a closed book. It is a river, ever-flowing, carrying stories, knowledge, and mysteries from the distant past into your own moment of awareness. The Sphinx is more than a monument. It is a testament, a reminder that civilizations rise and fall, that knowledge can vanish, yet the human spirit persists. Its silent gaze reaches across ages, asking us to wonder, to explore, and to embrace curiosity. It invites you to think deeply about your own life, your own creations, and the legacies you may leave behind. Every act of creation, every inquiry into the unknown, and every moment of reflection continues the dialogue that began long before our time. As you take in the desert night, let its quiet power wash over you. The stars emerge one by one, tiny points of light mirrored in the stone eyes of the Sphinx. In these moments of stillness, let your mind expand to consider the vastness of human possibility, the cycles of knowledge and forgetting, and the enduring connection between past, present, and future. The Sphinx is patient, watching, waiting, its message clear. Seek, question, create, and remember. And now, as you step back from the plateau, carry with you the echo of this journey. Let it inspire your curiosity, deepen your appreciation for the mysteries of history, and remind you of the enduring power of human ingenuity. The river of time continues to flow, and each of us participates in its current. The Sphinx has observed countless dawns and will witness countless more, yet in its silence, It offers guidance, perspective, and the profound reminder that our world is both older and more mysterious than we often imagine. This was another story in the endless river of time. And now, let it carry you gently forward into reflection, into dreams, into wonder. Good night, dreamer of ages. And remember to follow the channel so you never miss the next journey across time, mystery, and the infinite expanse of human curiosity.